broke. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the garage, and hopefully the leaf blower in the background is not too loud, but this is the video where we go over what happened at the track with the Silverado. And if you're a patron member or a YouTube member, you've already seen the video of the launch that killed the Silverado. I will put that at the end of this video, but keep in mind, we're going to talk about what happened, why it happened, and it's all my fault as usual. But what we're going to do next. So basically what happened was we literally twisted the axle out of the 4-link brackets. Now how did this happen? Well, we make too much horsepower. This thing is probably one of the more powerful L83s on the planet right now. You know, we're running well into the 20-some PSI of boost on it. That's just to start. This thing is very turned up. If you have not, go to tuning101.com and look at the videos as we do the tuning and all the steps to get this thing to where it's at today. So literally we're sitting in the pits or in the staging lanes, and I'm talking to Justin, my buddy that races motorcycles, about what's going to happen. And I told him straight up, I was like, I'm really worried about the axle on this thing breaking. And the reason behind it is that whenever I did the 4-link suspension on this, it wasn't necessarily performance based. It slowly evolved towards that, but back in the day, this truck had the Chevy Shake, and I was hell-bent on figuring out what was causing the issues, and that's why I did things like drive shafts, axles, ring and pinions, differentials, all that stuff, to the point of replacing the leaf springs with a 4-link and adjustable coilovers. Well, it just so happens that that kept on moving us in the direction of going drags. Now, whenever I did the 4-link, I pulled the axle out of this, and I used a kit that uses basically what you would call a 3/4 bracket on the axle. And that means instead of having to cut the ends of the axle tubes off to get the brackets on, they go around the axle tubes. And there lies the problem. And I didn't think about this. In hindsight, what I should have done before we went out and did this is I should have built some front mount brackets to go around, weld those onto the tubes, weld them onto the back brackets to give us more weld adhesion around there. Now, the welds were solid welds. This isn't a situation where we had cold welds or anything like that. It just turns out that we have too much power for what was trying to hold the axle in place, and in turn, whenever we launched, the axle twisted in the brackets, broke the welds loose, and it, of course, destroyed the brand new drive shaft. But luckily, the drive shaft paid for itself. It was an expensive drive shaft, but nothing else got damaged in the process. So we're good there. I'm happy with that aspect of it, and I'm not so much disappointed of the fact that we killed the drive shaft, because I'm not having to replace a brand new transmission either. I'd rather replace drive shafts all day long than have to swap transmissions, because it is 4 bolts to replace a drive shaft. So because of that, because I knew that this might be a potential issue, I actually went into the 2-step and lowered it. Originally, it was set around 3,500 to 4,000 for the launch. We were going to come really hard at this thing. I dropped it down to 2,800, and it still did it. So it, you know, you'll see in the video or in the launch down later on in this video, this thing came off the line perfectly. The 4-link did what it was supposed to. We applied the right amount of tire. We got a decent amount of separation without hitting the tires too much. The truck was driven forward at a very high rate of speed, and if this thing would have carried out another 10 foot, the front tires would have been off the ground. I mean, that's how much dead hook traction at 2,800 RPM launch, releasing the trans brake, and we were making 6 PSI of boost off the launch. And then, of course, as soon as we release the trans brake, it's party time. So let's stick our head underneath here, see if we can get a look at what's going on. Oh, by the way, before we do that, let's take a look at the side of the truck. This actually happened after the fact. Whenever we pulled the truck, hooked up to the truck with the 4-wheeler to drag it off the strip, the axle was still sitting in the brackets. Did not necessarily know what had happened yet. We just knew that the drive shaft had gotten destroyed. So we pull it back up in there. Whenever I get to the top of the staging lanes out of the way, I hit the brakes and the axle popped out. Literally, the truck kept on rolling, the axle stopped, popped out. And then whenever we went in to load this thing on the trailer, I hooked the winch on it on one side, and I had a guy spotting the other side, but he looked away just long enough to have it, this tire hit the ramp, and it pulled the other tire up, so the whole truck kept moving, and it just smashed in the side of the bed. So we're gonna have to take the bed off, get rid of it, and we'll probably come back in and just do fiberglass skirts on the side or something. No reason to put a bed back on this thing. So okay, I'm trying to find a good angle that you can see what happened, but you should be able to see up in here where the 3/4 brackets were wrapped around the axle, and literally this thing twisted the pinion up and just completely destroyed the welds. Half the welds are left on the brackets, half the welds are left on the axle. So it's, you know, it was carnage. Luckily, it looked like everything else for the most part survived. Looked like our coilovers are in decent shape, even though they kind of got shifted around a little bit. But I think the axle itself survived, which is a good sign to make sure. And surprisingly, I was really more concerned whenever I put these on. You got to be very careful on axles about putting too much heat into the axle tubes, because they will warp and then your axles won't go back in straight. So I was really happy to see that there was good penetration on the tubes themselves. There's still a lot of the weld left on the tubes. It just straight snapped the weld. So what's the plan? Well, originally it was just get rid of the axle, put a 9-inch in or something like that. But I'll be honest with you, this axle is a very stout axle. It's going to handle as much power, if not more power, than a Ford 9-inch. So there's not a whole lot of reason to replace this axle. Now, we could come in here, narrow it down so we can convert this thing over to a big tire, channel the rear frame, drop in another 4-link. That is kind of on the books. We might talk about doing that. For now, what we're going to try and do is just get the axle back into the brackets, get some welds on there so we can get this thing off the trailer. It's, you know, waking up at 40-degree mornings. The race season is over, so we're not going to be getting this thing to the track this year. This is going to be a 2021 project, so we have time to kind of marinate on it, but we should at least be able to get the axle somewhat centered back into the brackets, get the pinion angle using the old welds, kind of get an idea of where the pinion angle was, so we can throw the factory drive shaft back in enough just to kind of get it into storage and think about it. And then sometime this winter we will go ahead, pull the fuel cell out, which is mounted in the bed along with our water methanol and our nitrous and all that stuff. And in fact, we're taking the nitrous kit off of this and we're throwing it on the Nova, because this thing just doesn't need it. It makes too much power already. If we try to put 150 shot on this thing, we might circle back on that. We've got to get it down the track first. You know, there's no reason to have the potential for 1,100, 1,200 horsepower if we can't get down the track with 1,000 horsepower. So that's kind of the goal right now. We're going to get rid of the bed, remount our fuel cell, things like that, get everything set up, figure out what we're going to do with the axle. And if we keep the same axle, we'll go in, build the front brackets up and weld all that in, and we'll do a triple pass weld on it this time. We'll beef the living heck out of this thing, so that is not the fail point. Now, what does that mean? That means we're going to find what's going to fail next. Whenever you make horsepower of this magnitude, specifically on a platform like this that's not directly built to be raced, you're going to keep on finding failure points, and you're going to have to keep on addressing those points. So I was not disappointed. In fact, the thing that broke my heart the most was we did crumple up the side of the bed, because that's just money that we have to spend that we didn't have to spend otherwise. So what we may end up doing is cutting the skins off the driver's side and then trying to find a bed that's been wrecked in the junkyard that has a good passenger side, and we'll cut the skin off of that. And then we'll probably do the same, cut the skin off the tailgate, go over to a roll pan on it, and then we'll just do Zeus fasteners on it and then put a aluminum top on it. You know, keep it simple. I know that we don't want to really shed a lot of weight over the back end, but that being said, with the 4-link being dialed in properly and the proper separation whenever you're getting the hit, we can overcome a lot of that weight loss. But there's some other things that we can do to try and offset some of that. But the idea will be to, whenever we have this all said and done, that we have a nice platform that we can easily get in there and work on things like the rear end axle, etc., without having to work with a bed in place. So most likely what will happen here after we get the axle back underneath it so we can get the truck off the trailer, we'll probably go ahead and grab the engine hoist, hoist up the bed, get the bed pulled off the truck, throw it on the trailer for the winter until we can get rid of it, haul it off to the scrapyard, or cut off whatever parts that we want off of it, and then we're going to go from there. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and post in the video right here of the launch. There's the launch, a slow motion launch, and then a slow motion zoomed in launch. The zoomed in one's a little bit hard to watch, but you'll see it shoot half the drive shaft out the back side. And man, she was ready to run. She was really getting ready to rip out a nice time. I'm really bummed out that we did not get a time in this season, but that's racing. That's making horsepower. And you know, the initial design of this 4-link served its purpose. We just put too much to it and didn't make the proper adjustments to make sure it could handle all that extra power. So I'm going to get back into the garage. I got plenty of work to do. You know the drill. ABT, always be tuning.